Back here, CBS 12 News this morning. You know, it sometimes seems like most of the battles being fought in schools are about politics and pronouns, but there's a bigger crisis playing out in our classrooms, and the stakes are much higher. Now, you've probably heard the phrase, up until third grade, kids are learning to read, and after third grade, they're reading to learn. But the reality is, barely half of American kids can read at grade level. Florida is doing a little better than that, only by a percentage point or two. And if reading is the most fundamental skill in a child's education, why are we failing to teach half of them? This week, CBS 12 News will be looking into what is happening in our local schools to figure out why our kids can't read. These kids are diligently learning how to read.
Can you give me a sentence with the word?
While some of their classmates read silently to themselves. This is not a Palm Beach County public school. It's a small private school called Bliss Academy, started by a former district teacher, Anna Solanke, during the educational chaos of the pandemic.
Florida's grown so much and the class sizes are too big, so I left the public school system.
Right now, almost half the kids in public schools are not reading at grade level. Only 54% of Palm Beach County third graders made that mark last year. While that is slightly higher than the state average of 53%, it is not good enough. Tara Wallace worked as a Palm Beach County elementary school teacher and administrator for almost 20 years.
It's nationwide, but we're normalizing failure.
And Tara says you don't have to look far to find the answer why. It's known as the reading wars, which has been going on for decades, a debate about the correct way to teach kids how to read. There's the phonics way, which students learn each sound by each letter, sun, to decode what each word says. And there's whole word reading, where students learn to memorize the word and use things like context clues, like the picture, to try to figure out what the word says. Actually, whole word reading has dominated American education over the last few years. And it's only been recently that research has proven that whole word reading doesn't work for a lot of kids.
But we know today that's not reading, that's memorization. And that's why so many kids, they may do well in kindergarten and first grade because they're memorizing the words. So then when they get up to the intermediate grades and the text becomes more complex, that's where we're seeing the struggle because they never really learned how to read. They learned how to memorize.
Last year, Florida's Board of Education returned to teaching phonics to help kids read. But for many students, that change comes too late. And many whole word instructors have never taught any other way. Erica Whitfield has been on the Palm Beach County School Board for the last 9 years.
So when you look back and see that the school district spent so much time and so much money on not teaching phonics, do you look back at that and see that as a waste of time and money?
No, I don't think it's a waste. I mean, some people do well with it. Some people don't need it as much. I think, you know, it's all different learning styles. We have to incorporate all ways for children to learn into it. So I don't think it was a waste of time.
And the way kids are being taught is only part of the problem. Finding people to teach them is an issue as well. Palm Beach County Superintendent Mike Burke told CBS 12 News before the school year began, the district has been forced to think outside the box to fill hundreds of teacher vacancies.
And now we are, kind of trying to get creative in finding teachers here. Can that make that process of teaching reading to those elementary school kids that much more difficult?
It can. I mean, you're seeing more people come into teaching where it wasn't necessarily their first career, or they maybe had a degree in another subject matter that wasn't teaching, but then they go through the process of getting credentialed. So yeah, there's an advantage to being someone that knew from day one going into college, I want to teach elementary school, and they've got that whole educational experience behind them.
But Tara says even for her, who had the whole educational experience behind her, there's no substitute for the in-class experience.
Upon teaching elementary, it was really a rude awakening because I had to teach these little kids how to read, and I didn't know how because, College of Educations, they don't necessarily give you the formula for teaching kids how to read. They will talk to you about doing read alouds and keeping the students engaged. But I didn't know how to teach them how to read.
Now this is where math comes in handy. Fewer qualified teachers plus more students, half of whom need extra help with reading, equals a big problem. You can understand how students can fall through the cracks and how some, like these at Bliss Academy, leave for private school.
I feel like some children can cope with it and the rest are lost.
Now, we know for some kids, learning how to read actually comes along quite easy, but for many, including bright children, they need intensive one-on-one instruction. That's something few school districts can afford, even if they had the trained teachers to do it. Back here on CBS 12 News at 9, if you can read, you can succeed. Sounds simplistic, but it's true, and so is the opposite. According to the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, 2/3 of students who cannot read proficiently by the end of 4th grade will wind up in jail or on welfare. In Palm Beach County, where only a little more than half of students meet that bar, that is too many kids being left behind. Yesterday, we showed you all concerns in the classroom. That has led school districts to put more pressure on parents to get involved in their child's reading education. And in many cases, they're failing the grade.
Sound it out. T-O.
6-year-old Ganny is getting extra tutoring from the Literacy Coalition of Palm Beach County at the Bloom Center in Boynton Beach.
We're starting him early with the coalition because he's a few notches behind on the first preliminary test, so we want to make sure he is on task.
Ganny, his brother, and sister are all being raised by their grandparents.
Well, we have 3 young ones, 6, 8, and 10, but like I say, they're worth it. It's hard, it's not easy, it's important. We're on a mission.
A mission to make sure the kids can read at grade level. That's a lot harder than it sounds.
There's a test to test kindergarten readiness. About half the students are ready, half are not.
Kindergarten readiness is an emphasis for Mike Burke as he starts his 3rd year as Palm Beach County Schools superintendent.
And when you get to 3rd grade, it's kind of the same thing with 3rd grade reading proficiency. Where about half the students are proficient, the other half are not. And there's a very, very strong correlation between those 2 groups of students.
The district is pushing for all kids to be kindergarten ready. So what does that mean? Among other things, the district says that students should be able to write and spell their own name. Students should also know the alphabet and know what sound each letter makes. And kids should be able to recognize easy rhyming words like cat and hat. These are all things the district says kids should know before they even step foot inside of a school.
They were missing basic literacy skills.
As a school-based administrator in some of Palm Beach County's less affluent schools, Leroy Kelson saw too many kids who simply were not ready for kindergarten.
Things like alphabet knowledge, knowing how to sound out basic letter sounds. They were all missing these things, so it was very hard for instruction to take place at grade level when they were missing all of these foundational skills.
And you've worked with kids that have no books in the house?
Yes, I've come in contact with students that have no access to books in their homes. The first opportunity that they receive to interact with a book is inside of school.
And that's the problem. Expert teachers and administrators all agree kids who come to kindergarten without any of that knowledge are already behind.
I think those are a lot of misconceptions with parents that they think school starts in kindergarten. But the biggest component and the first component of literacy is phonological awareness, and that's something that can be worked on and improved upon from birth.
So the Palm Beach County School District created programs aimed at getting students prepared before they even set foot in elementary school.
It's really important to think about our community as a whole, not just the places that we oversee.
School board member Erica Whitfield says getting to kids early is the key to reading later. That means reaching out to parents.
We were sending emails out that actually had lessons that you could do with your student at home. So they could actually sit down, and there was an amazing teacher in all 3, English, Spanish, Creole, speaking to the parents, teaching them how to teach their student.
But former elementary school teacher and administrator Tara Wallace says the district is just shifting responsibility to parents because schools are not doing the job.
It's like, oh, well, they're not doing what they need to do at home. They're coming in low. We cannot give them what they need because of what's happening before they get to school. And I do not believe in that. I think that's hogwash. I think that's just the district being reactive as opposed to being proactive.
So who is right? We took that question to an expert, Dr. Sunshine Moss.
The whole idea that kids that aren't reading level in 3rd grade are less likely to reach it later on, is that science? Or is that a symptom of an educational system that is not doing enough for the children?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? There are windows where things are easier to learn. And, and that's true. But there's nothing that prevents children from learning to read it later.
So the earlier you learn to read, the easier it is. If you're behind in kindergarten, third grade, whatever, it is harder to catch up. That's why the district is focusing on encouraging families to help and get books into kids' hands.
That is the first teacher that is the best teacher, so our teachers can just come in and do the education, and the family is doing well on the weekends and nights when they're at home.
Some families obviously aren't lucky enough to have that or be in that situation, single parent home, maybe working multiple jobs. If a child comes to school every day and does the work, should they be able to be at reading level?
Absolutely, yes, they should.
So it's supposed to be happening, but the reality is in too many cases it's not. And frankly, teachers are overwhelmed and typically, in many cases, can't provide the extra help those kids need. For some kids, reading comes very easily.
Learning new things when you're out and about.
People who work in education say it can be like magic.
Either of you know where that might be.
But for other kids, even when they have books at home and parents who read to them and strong teachers at good schools, learning to read can still be a frustrating struggle. And the search for reason why can be just as frustrating. All this week, CBS 12 News is looking for answers to why our kids can't read. Today, we're talking about dyslexia and the challenging process of getting children diagnosed and making sure they get the help they need to succeed.
He's amazing. He's an awesome kid.
But Stephanie Salamoni's son has struggled since day one of preschool. In second grade, a school psychologist told her he had attention deficit disorder, but years of treatment didn't seem to do any good. So she got a private evaluation, and he tested positive for dyslexia.
And I sat there and I was like, well, what about ADHD? And she's like, no, it presents like ADHD. Because when he's looking at the page, he gets really fidgety. And I went home that night and I looked everything up and I was mind blown how he was almost in 5th grade and nobody caught this.
The National Institute of Health reports nearly 1 in 5 people have dyslexia or a similar learning disability. But Tara Wallace, a former Palm Beach County teacher and administrator, says the number of kids getting help from the school district to address dyslexia is far lower than that.
My entire career, I've worked at Title I schools. Schools who are traditionally low performing, right? Literacy rates are typically low. I've never seen a student diagnosed with dyslexia.
Tara spent her career teaching kids how to read, so imagine her frustration when she couldn't teach her own son.
I read to him every single night, and I couldn't figure out what was going wrong.
And then she started asking another question. How could no one at his school figure it out either? He had classic symptoms of dyslexia, including confusing similar words like cat and caught, spelling erratically, an inability to focus when there are distractions, and difficulty distinguishing between left and right. Still, no one caught on, or Tara believes they didn't want to see what was right in front of them.
Did you feel like you were getting at least a fair shake from the district, that they were at least trying to help your son?
No. I believe a lot of it is compliance, right? It was a check in the box.
Sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day.
That's Valerie Harris, another former Palm Beach County School District employee. She coordinated what are called Individual Education Plans, or IEPs. Those plans outline how the school serves students with special needs, from profound disabilities to minor learning deficiencies. An IEP meeting is the key moment for a parent to get the help their child needs.
Many times I would be rushed out of an IEP meeting because, I had 7 IEP meetings that day, and I felt that that parent wasn't getting as much information as they needed.
But Florida parents have the right to demand their kids' educational needs are met by public schools, and it can pay to have help in that fight.
Very intimidating for parents to go into IEP meetings.
Ashley Ravello is an advocate who specializes in childhood dyslexia.
There's an intrinsic belief and trust that the school would want what is best for my child. So why is an advocate needed?
So we think that, right? We put our trust and faith in our education system to provide the best education possible to our children. And unfortunately, there's very limited resources in our schools, and there's not enough teachers to help children that have disabilities.
Another complication is the term dyslexia is not typically included in an IEP. Instead, the student is listed as having a specific learning disability. That's an umbrella term for a number of related deficiencies. So a teacher could look at an IEP and still not know exactly what help a student needs. Once an IEP is drafted, it becomes a legal document, which the district, school, and teacher are bound to follow. That's another reason Ashley says district staff may be reluctant to issue one.
There's not enough support or staff to help with all of the IEPs, so they'd rather just not write them. It's easier that way.
Ashley took her son out of public school when he was diagnosed with dyslexia, and Valerie Harris's dyslexic daughter wasn't getting the help she needed either. So she quit her job to teach Abby at home full-time. Tara Wallace hired a private tutor for her dyslexic son, and it remains a struggle.
He hates school. He does.
But as a working single mom, Stephanie Salamoni says she doesn't have those options.
I tried to get him into a better rated school, so I applied through the McKay Scholarship, and luckily he did go to better schools that were supposed to be able to really help him with his learning disability, and I've become very close with the ESC department. But even so, like, if that's the best school in Palm Beach County, we're not doing so great. It's been really hard.
And the McKay Scholarship that Stephanie just mentioned, that allows students who are struggling with learning deficiencies to earn money towards private schools' tuition, or also would let a student change public schools if they would like. Now, we reached out repeatedly to speak to the individual in charge of special education for the district to get some clarity on these issues. Those requests were repeatedly denied. They did give us a written statement that says basically the district has educators who specialize in helping students with dyslexia, and it has added to those efforts over the years. You can read parts of that statement right now on CBS12.com. All right, Lauren, thank you. Well, the battle over parental rights in education has become a flashpoint here in Florida, resulting in headline-grabbing fights over history, gender, race relations, banning books, even bathrooms in our schools. But what about parents' right to get help for their child's learning disability? Those rights have been on the books for years. And as we explained in this morning's installment of our series, Why Our Kids Can't Read, one Palm Beach County family could not get their daughter the educational support she needed. So they took the nation's 10th largest school district to court. Leah Kapp has always been a bright girl, but from a very young age, Daniel and Nicole Kapp knew there was something off when it came to her reading.
During first grade, you read the picture book, and the story would say, and the pony jumped over the fence, and she would read, the horse jumped over the wall. That's because she wasn't really reading.
And the Kapps had seen this before. Leah's older brother has dyslexia, and her first grade teacher thought Leah probably did too. Leah's brother was getting help through the University of Miami. The Kapps took Leah there, and she tested positive for dyslexia and ADHD. The Kapps believed going into second grade, Leah would be able to get the extra help she needed at her public school in Palm Beach County. They were wrong.
You know, as a parent, I come to them and I trust that they're going to lead me down the proper path. But we found out later they weren't.
An evaluator at the school said that Leah was disorganized, unmotivated, and easily distracted. They attributed her struggles in reading to ADHD, not dyslexia.
The school district kept saying, no, she's fine. She hasn't failed yet. She's not bad enough.
And she came home and she was in tears. She came home crying. She said, they are not going to teach our daughter to read. I said to my wife, I said, they are going to teach our daughter to read. They are going to give her an IEP.
An IEP is an individualized education plan. It's a roadmap for a student that is deemed to need specialized instruction and sets goals and lists services that the school district needs to provide by law. If a student needs an IEP and is not given one, a school district could be found in violation of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which states that all children with disabilities, no matter how severe, must be able to have a free public education with services to help their disability. If you as a parent feel your child has a disability, but the school district disagrees, you can fight for an IEP. The Kapps filed a state complaint and hired an attorney, forcing the district to give Leah a full evaluation for dyslexia.
What they did in the process of testing her was they stretched that testing out and did it as slowly as they possibly could.
When they did get a final report about a year later, again, it said Leah was about average. and that her dyslexia was not severe enough for extra help. But parts of the school psychologist's report were missing, and some of the report's findings did not make sense to the CAPS.
Now, it completely contradicted the professor at the University of Miami, who basically spent her whole career in reading disabilities and learning disabilities and identification of learning disabilities.
Well, something was wrong. The CAPS reached out to the dyslexia expert who created the test that speech pathologist was using, a Dr. Nikki Nelson at Western Michigan University. Dr. Nelson looked at the results from Leah's test and said the speech pathologist must have misread the manual on how to conduct the test. Leah definitely has dyslexia. During the next eligibility meeting with the district, Daniel made sure to bring up Dr. Nelson's claim that the speech pathologist misread the manual and did not administer the test correctly.
We thought that through this negotiating process that the school district would relent and say, oh, I guess the world's expert says she has a problem, and the answer was no.
The CAPS were beginning to feel like they were not being taken seriously, and that maybe the district was actively trying to keep their daughter from getting an IEP.
At one of the meetings, the speech pathologist of the school district, she wore a t-shirt to the meeting. These were all on Zoom, and the t-shirt actually said, I read the test manual too. And she did that to make fun of me.
In a later deposition, the speech pathologist testified that t-shirt was not to offend the CAPS, but rather was made for personal inspiration because she had felt intimidated during previous meetings with Daniel. But according to the deposition, she did show it off to the other district personnel at the meeting, and the CAPS say everyone laughed.
I'm appalled by how they acted. They were so unprofessional. I can't even believe somebody would treat people like the way they did.
Also, teachers that had originally said Leah had shown signs of dyslexia had gone quiet. Through emails and testimony during hearings, the teachers said they were led to believe by district officials that they were getting sued by the CAPS, which was not true.
And they were told the parents are suing us, don't say anything. The attorney and the management of the school district went so far as to intimidate the teachers so that the teachers wouldn't help us.
The CAPS moved Leah to the Bill Graff School, a private school in West Palm Beach that specializes in dyslexic instruction, but they still wanted to hold the school district accountable. And the CAPS filed for a due process hearing in the summer of 2021 after a request for mediation failed. The hearing itself happened over the course of 4 days in April of last year, and the judge ruled that the CAPS were right and that school officials were treating the meetings and evaluations of Leah as a, quote, mere formality, adding the school staff simply ignored the needs of this student and was condemned to allow the parents to continue to provide the dyslexia interventions the school should have been providing the entire school year. Then, when ordered to go through the eligibility process, the school board doubled down and predetermined the services on the IEP, shutting out meaningful parental input. The judge ordered the district to compensate the CAPS for reading services designed specifically for Leah's reading needs and reimburse them for tuition at the Bill Graff School.
Would you allow either one of your kids to go to a Palm Beach County School District school after this?
No, absolutely not. Not the way they treated us. They were very deliberate and they were very personal, and they really showed me that they absolutely do not care one bit for our child at all.
Every kid should have that opportunity, because if you can't read, you can't become a TV anchor, you can't become an astronaut because you have to read and do math, you can't become a doctor, you can't be a lawyer. And so if the school district is not going to help these kids, they're really choosing the winners and losers, and it's sad. It's just sad.
So it's not just the CAPS. You know, others have fought the district and won, including Ashley Ravillo. She's the advocate that we introduced you to yesterday. But DanCat tells me that they sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars into experts and legal fees, and that's obviously something most families cannot afford to do. Well, thank you, Lauren. You know, I've spent this week outlining all of the reasons why our kids can't read. There's a lot getting in the way. The reality is there are problems at home, problems in schools, problems in society that are all making it harder for kids to be reading at the level they should be. And what I've learned from speaking to experts is that relying on just the instruction your child is getting at school might be enough to keep them learning at grade level, but it also might not. So if you do not want your child to be part of these statistics we keep telling you about, it's really up to you as a parent to be the leader of your child's literacy education. Thankfully, there are people out there to help. This is Literacy Night at Citrus Cove Elementary School in Boynton Beach. Parents, teachers, and kids sharing their love of reading.
Practice, practice, practice.
Dr. Natalie Cromwell, the principal at Citrus Cove, is hosting the first in what she hopes will be many of these nights to get parents more engaged in their children's literacy education.
I felt that this was very important to plan this evening in order to create that school-home connection.
I asked some of the parents and students why they thought so many kids right now are struggling to read. A common answer kept coming up. So many distractions are keeping kids away from books.
I think, it's being motivated and sitting down to learn to read. I think it's difficult for a 6-year-old, but I think he's doing it.
Is there specific things that she struggles with? The motivation to read, in a world full of tablets and other things. Sitting down with a book can be a challenge sometimes. So how do you do it? Rewards. Just try to find some motivation, make it fun.
My teacher, she normally says if you don't like a subject, that's because you just don't know it yet.
Experts say that's the key. Find ways to get your kids to fall in love with reading.
We have a roll and read, which is like a sight word game that parents can play together where they get to roll numbers and find words and read them together. So it makes that learning fun, but also interacting in a positive way with their children.
I mean, teachers only have a set amount of time during the day, right?
Yes.
To be able to teach kids how to read. It's got to keep going, right? Throughout the entire the day, entire the week, and all year long.
Absolutely. And if it's important to the parents, it's going to be important to the children.
School board member Erica Whitfield hopes other schools will join Citrus Cove hosting these literacy nights. She says the district does not take the disappointing literacy numbers lightly.
I think it is actually the most important thing that we do here at the district is making sure that students are ready to go out in the world and can consume any information that they want to and be able to judge it critically.
Whitfield tells me what the district is doing to get kids kindergarten ready, to interact more with parents, and to add more training for teachers will start to get more kids where they need to be.
Right now we're at about 54% of the schools reading on grade level at 3rd grade, and we would really like to see that get into the 70s and 80s.
In addition to what's happening in schools, there's plenty of free community resources for kids and parents. The Literacy Coalition of Palm Beach County provides services to over 50,000 kids in the county. That's where these kids are getting some free after-school tutoring, but they also provide free books to families and some in-school help. Through the Grow Lit project, Leroy Kelson is actively working.
I think you have to cultivate a love for reading very early on in life. I think as kids continue to get older and they don't have access to it, they grow with a disdain for it.
And of course, there's the Palm Beach County Library System, whose 17 branches boast after-school events and activities, and access to millions of books, all with a free library card. After all of that, if you feel like your child may have an issue with dyslexia or another reading deficiency, talk to your child's teacher about it. That's always the first place to go. But if you feel strongly that you need help from outside the school, former Exceptional Services Education Director and mother of a daughter with dyslexia, Valerie Harris says you should talk to an advocate.
If they recommend that you fight for a particular service, definitely fight the district. In Palm Beach schools, those are the parents that get the services they need. If they are loud enough and create enough problems for the district, then they are going to do a better job serving your student.
But that is a last resort. There are a lot of people and resources out there for struggling readers. What's most important is that you understand what is out there and what your child needs. And right now you can go to CBS12.com. We have a link to all sorts of resources for parents to get free books, free tutoring, or get some of their questions answered about your kids' literacy, including a lot about dyslexia.
So 5 days now of your reporting here on why our kids can't read. What's your big takeaway? What do you hope parents have gotten out of this week?
Well, I hope, the reason why I kind of went down this path is a lot of parents are talking to me. I myself have 2 second graders at home that are learning how to read. And a lot of the parents saying that their kids are struggling. This is what I can tell you. It's important for parents to know that you need to be active in your child's path to learning how to read. You have to have an open dialogue with your student's teacher for sure, but you also can't wait for them to tell you that something is wrong. You have to read at home to your child, be able to recognize those issues yourself, and a lot of times just read in front of your child. Try to pass along the love of reading. And you have to be aware that sometimes you have to push hard to get the help your child needs at school. The bottom line after all of this, if you get the sense that your child is struggling, you can't just assume that one day they're going to just figure it out, because there are plenty of barriers out there working against them.
You've got to be the first line of defense for your kids, always.
You gotta help, yeah. All right, to catch up on our week-long series, you can listen to the audio documentary, Why Our Kids Can't Read. Just go to CBS12.com to listen to it there, or you can listen to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just search Why Our Kids Can't Read.